What happens to our collective money psychology when an entire generation stops believing in the American dream and the idea that hard work pays off? This is something that I write about in my newsletter about the death of the American dream, and I believe that this creates sort of three distinct responses. But first, let's just talk a little bit about the context. Nearly 80% of Americans under 30 don't believe the American dream is real anymore, and that loss of faith is really reshaping how we think about money in interesting ways, and I'm going to talk about three psychological responses. The first is what I call financial arrested development. So if traditional milestones feel impossible, why save for a down payment if prices are rising faster than you can save? Many people just stop orienting their financial lives around them entirely. Their mindset becomes, if long-term goals aren't achievable, I should just focus on immediate satisfaction, hence what we call YOLO economics. The second response is the entrepreneurship salvation myth. When traditional paths seem blocked, they glorify the grind never stops mentality. And we see that with the explosion of people that now identify as self-employed, that engage in the gig economy, and social media has just overflowed with the whole rise and grind mantras. Look how amazing it is to work for yourself, to be a freelancer. But of course, there's a lot of downsides to being self-employed, to being a freelancer that I don't think are talked about enough online. And also what will happen when you do work for yourself is that if you do struggle financially, you might see that more as a personal failure rather than a systemic issue. And the third response is financial nihilism. It's a little similar to arrested development, but it's sort of this, I don't want to engage with money at all. If I can't win, why play mentality. Examples include, revenge spending, consumption driven by the belief that traditional financial planning is just pointless. And it's sort of this complete loss of faith in the system's basic bargain that sacrifice today leads to reward tomorrow. But what's really interesting is that this shift could potentially also be creating space for something healthier. Instead of defining success purely through consumption, a lot of people are focusing on financial resilience, building emergency funds, and multiple income streams rather than just chasing specific wealth targets or consumption targets, like the picket fence, the big house, etc. And I think the insight to kind of walk away from with all this is that when the system repeatedly fails to reward the behaviors it claims to value, people will naturally adapt to their strategies. And if you're curious about the money psychology behind your financial decision making, my newsletter, Your Brain on Money, explores these patterns every week, and you can subscribe via the link in my bio.